Guys, with the recent updates to the Warden, the Frost Warden is actually very viable and very strong, almost to the point where it might be up with the Fire DK. Check this out. Guys, this thing is very powerful. It can get to cap on the crit by itself, as well as having very strong spell damage, very strong self heals, and it is just a killing machine. So first, let's go and take a look at the sets. So on the front bar, we are using the Master's Perfected Ice Staff. This comes from Dragon Star Arena. You can do this on normal or vet. It does not matter. The vet will give you an extra 100 damage while you are on your front bar. This will make it so it reduces the cost of our destructive touch skill by 10%, and it increases our weapon and spell damage by 600 for 4 seconds after activating it. Now we're using this with precise and poison damage enchant, and this will just be on the front bar. On our back bar, the first main set we are using is Whorl of the Depths. Now this is a flex spot. So Whorl of the Depths comes from Dreadsail Reef, which is a trial. If you don't have access to this or you don't want to do a trial, I will give you another option. This will make it so you gain 2 lines of spell damage. You gain Minor Slayer at all times, which increases your damage done to monsters by 5%. And then if you have the perfected version, you get an extra 600 crit. If you don't have the perfected, you just miss out on that. When you deal damage with a light attack, you apply the Whorl of the Depths to a target, dealing frost damage over 8 seconds, and then when it ends, it creates a 5-meter radius under the target for 6 seconds, which deals additional damage every second, and this can occur once every 18 seconds. So this is an ice staff on the back bar. We are using infused and weapon damage on the back. We are using all the jewelry with Bloodthirsty and the spell damage enchant. Now, there's another set that almost produces the exact same DPS. This is about 1.5k extra DPS, Icy Conjurer. Icy Conjurer comes from Frostbite. This will give you Magicka spell damage, offensive penetration, very good overall. And then if you apply a minor debuff to an enemy, it summons a non-reflectable Ice Wraith that deals massive amount of damage over 10 seconds, once every 10 seconds. So this, like I said, does about 1.5k less DPS than Whorl of the Depths. Now the other thing with the Whorl set is it does have an AoE aspect on the second half, so overall this is better as far as the options go. Next up for our other main set, we are using Frostbite. This actually drops overland in Blackwood, so that means you can farm it yourself or go buy it in the traders. So this gives us another 2 lines of spell damage and some crit chance, and then it increases your damage done with frost abilities by 8%, increases your damage done against chilled enemies by 4%, and increase your damage done against enemies who have minor brittle by 2%. We get all those happening, so we have 14% extra damage done to all enemies. It is very powerful. This is a light armor set, so we're using that across all the body pieces, and we are using Divines and Max Mag for the enchant. Next up, we are using Nunatak. This is something that you can get from the Imperial City. If you do not have this, I do have another option as well, however, it's not nearly as good. So we're using 2 medium pieces. You could actually get away with light. We are way over crit cap, so you could get away with light to get some extra penetration and more crit chance. But for this testing, I had done it in medium. Now we're using the Mag enchant as well as Divines on these 2. The first line gives you some armor, which is nice in case you do get hit, since we are wearing light armor on the body. And then when you deal frost damage, you create a 6-meter area under the target for 6 seconds, dealing damage every second. And it applies a 40% snare for 4 seconds. Enemies who are damaged 4 times become immobilized and get major brittle for 4 seconds, causing them to take 20% increased critical damage. And this can occur once every 15 seconds. Now this does not sound like it has a lot of uptime. However, during my testing on the trial dummy, it actually had 44% uptime on the major brittle on the trial dummy. The set itself was procced on the dummy 53% of the time, so that's actually quite a bit of time where it's taking 20% crit damage from not only you, but from everybody in the group. So it's a very powerful set. Now, if you don't have this, since we do want to kind of stick with the Frost theme, the only real best Frost set that you could use for monster set would be Ice Heart. This comes from Dire Frost Keep. It gives you some crit chance, and then when you deal critical damage, you gain a damage shield, so it is good for survivability. And then while the damage shield is active, you do damage in an AoE around you for every second for 6 seconds, and it can occur once every 6 seconds. Now, before we get on to the build, some people might want to wear the best in slot stuff. If you do wear Reliquin and Pillar of Nerd, you can hit for about 105k was the highest I've gotten so far, but I've only done about 3 test runs, so I'm sure you can get a lot higher if you actually try to use the best in slot gear. However, I prefer to have more fun with my builds, make it unique, but still be able to do endgame content, and this thing sure can. Even with this setup that's not using the best slot, even with Icy Conjurer, you can still hit about 95k DPS, which is more than enough to do any content in the game. And guys, there will be a written description down below in the description of this video if you guys do want to check that out. Now, first up, let's get into our stats. So we got 64 attributes into Magicka, and we are using the Thief Mundus Stone. For our Magicka, we are looking at 31.3k Magicka, got about 18.5k health and a 15k stamina. For our mag recovery, we're looking at about 1400 and about 700 stam. Now, all of this is unbuffed, so we're looking at about 4k spell damage and 35% crit damage and 5k penetration. We got about 16.5k spell resist and 13k physical resist. If we buff up here, we get to 7.4k weapon spell damage, and we get about 53% crit chance. And then our mag recovery does go up to about 2k and stam recovery up to about 900. Now guys, for our crit damage, we do have, as you can see here, 151% crit damage, and this is also with no CP providing crit damage. If you did do your CP, you are going to be hitting 160 to 170 depending on what you use. So we are way over cap. And that is because of our monster set. We don't need that 20% extra. However, it will help the group do all that more. If we do look at a normal dummy, this is not the trial dummy, we do hit for 116. So if you just threw on your normal fighting finesse or your backstabber CP, you're going to be at crit cap when you're running here. Now that is only when the major brittle is on, but still that would mean you're at about 116 effectively, and then you get up to max when this procs or when your healer gives you major force. So we are doing very good on the crit damage front. And this is also solo, like I said, so solo you can get to 125% at almost all times. Now for the consumables, we do have a few setups here, but all of them do use the Ghastly Eyeball. This gives you about 4.6k Magicka and about 460 mag recovery. Now, like I said, we have multiple setups, so if you are solo and you want to do the solo setup where you might need to be providing yourself some heals, and depending on the skills that you want, you might want to use any heroism pot. The ones I were using was the ones that they are the expensive ones that give the mag and stam back to you as well, but you will have 2 spells that already give you your prophecy and sorcery, so we could just use heroism pots. If you're not wanting to use those and you want to slot some more damaging skills, you could just do your spell pots. This will also work very well. This is what I used to get the 95k DPS. Now for the skills, and this is the setup that I used to get 95k DPS. This is more for group play using the spell pots. So this is taking in more damage over time and less survivability. First up, we are using Barbed Trap. This comes from the Fighters Guild line. When you hit this, you gotta wait 1.5 seconds, and then when it triggers, it will deal upfront damage and then a large DOT over 20 seconds, and it grants you minor force, increasing your critical damage by 10% for the duration. And this also has a higher chance to apply the hemorrhaging status effect, and the enemies are immobilized for 2 seconds if they're not a boss. Next up, we are using Subterranean Assault. This is the Stam morph. This summons shulks that will deal massive damage in a carpet in front of you after 3 seconds. And then after another 3 seconds, they will resurface again and deal more upfront damage. Next up, we got our first frost skill, which is Arctic Blast. When you hit this, it does deal a massive heal up front. I actually heal for about 10k in the tooltip, and it's going to be a lot more in game. After you hit that, for 20 seconds, you will be dealing AoE damage every 2 seconds, stunning enemies, and it has a much higher chance to apply the chilled status effect. Next up, we have Frost Reach. You want to make sure you get this morph. The other morph will turn you into a tank, and you will be taunting things which you do not want to be doing. Frost Reach will increase your range and reduce the cost. This does an upfront attack and then a DOT, and enemies who are hit with the initial hit are afflicted with the chilled status effect. Next up, we're using Cutting Dive. This is going to summon a Cliff Racer that deals upfront damage, and then they will bleed over 10 seconds. If you are more than 7 meters away from them, you will also set them off balance. However, you may not be that far away because of your barbed trap. That is the only thing keeping you within close range. So if you want, you could do the other morph where it's a ranged barb trap. However, you don't get the extra hemorrhaging status effect. Next up, we are using Wild Guardian. This is a pet that you can have, but you have to have it on both bars as your ultimate. And while this is active, it will deal damage every few seconds, and it will sometimes do an AoE in front of it, causing a massive amount of damage and stunning the enemies. And every time you get 75 ultimate, if it's already summoned, it'll take a giant chunk out of the enemy, and that is an executable damage. He also has a higher chance of applying the hemorrhaging status effect. On the back bar, we are using Elemental Susceptibility. This morph will make it so they gain Major Breach, which they might already have because of the tank, but it will cause them to gain the Burning, Chilled, and Concussed status effect once every 7.5 seconds. Next up, we got Unstable Wall of Frost. This will cause damage every second in a giant carpet. You do cause your allies to gain a frost shield that does absorb some damage for projectiles. Chilled enemies are also inflicted with minor breach, and their movement speed is reduced by 40%, and everything gets chilled very easily. We have 99% chilled uptime on this build, especially for single targets. And then when the effect ends, the barrier explodes, dealing damage, and then it will also shield you and nearby allies for an additional amount from projectiles. We're mainly using this to proc our weapon damage enchant. Next up, we are using a Mystic Orb. This is from the Undaunted line. This will summon an orb that slowly goes forward, dealing damage every second. While it's active, you also gain 100 extra recoveries, and then an ally can synergize, dealing a massive explosion and restoring about 4k resources to the ally. Next up, we're using Winter's Revenge. This is a giant AoE that you can throw out at range. It deals damage every second for 12 seconds, and this damage increases by 30% if you're using this with a destruction staff equipped. Enemies who are hit get their movement speed reduced by 30%, and it has a higher chance to apply the chilled status effect. Lastly, on our back bar, we are using Fetcher Infection. This is a DOT that lasts over 20 seconds, and every second cast of the ability deals 60% increased damage. This also afflicts the enemy with minor vulnerability. Now, if you are wanting to run solo and you need more survivability and self-buffing, I would swap out the orbs with Blue Betty Netch, which will give you 5k extra magicka over its duration, and it is a free casting skill. And this also gives you sorcery on both bars, and it will remove one negative effect from you every 5 seconds. Then I would also swap out Elemental Susceptibility with Lotus Blossom. This will make it so that way your light attacks restore health, and then you also gain Major Prophecy. This will also mean you don't have to use your weapon pots anymore. You can use tri-pots or heroism pots. And with this setup, we got about 85k DPS. Now in the CP, like I said, we are not actually using Fighting Finesse or Backstabber on any of the trial dummy runs because we're at 150% crit damage without these two. Now, if you are running solo, I would recommend running Fighting Finesse. This will give you the 8%, so that means you're at 124% crit damage when your monster helm is procced, and it's procced 50% of the time. So you will be at max cap by yourself, which is very powerful. You are providing major and minor brittle to the enemy, which means they take 30% extra crit damage from all of your other allies as well. So currently I am using Untamed Aggression to get extra 150 spell damage, Wrathful Strikes to get 200 weapon and spell damage for damaging abilities, Thaumaturge to increase DOTs by 6%, and Biting Aura to increase AoEs by 6%. In the red tree, we're using Bionis Vitality to gain more health, Fortify to gain more armor, Rejuvenation for more recoveries, and Siphoning spells to gain magicka whenever you kill something. Now for the passives, I'm only going to cover the passives that actually affect this build. All passives will in some way, so you will want to get them later down the road. These are just going to be the ones that will really help you put out your damage. In the animal companions, you want to get Savage Beast. This will give you 4 ultimate every 8 seconds when you cast an animal companion's ability. Flourish will give you 12% more mag and stam recovery for having an animal ability slotted. And then Advanced Species is a big one. It will give us 4% crit damage for every animal companion ability slotted. We get 12% on both bars. If you are using Lotus Blossom, in the green balance tree you could get Nature's Gift. This would give you some magicka or stamina whenever you heal an ally with your Lotus Blossom. And I would also get Maturations, that way you get minor toughness any time you heal yourself. Next up, in Winter's Embrace, you want to get Glacial Presence. This will increase the chance of applying Chilled to your enemies by 200%, and it will also increase the damage of your Chilled status effect. For me, it increases it by about 1k. Frozen Armor will give you some extra resistances for having Winter Embrace ability slotted. Icy Aura will reduce the effectiveness of snares, and Piercing Cold will increase your damage done by 12% for us, since we are using an Ice Staff on both bars. In the Destro Staff line, you may or may not want to get Trifocus. This will make it so if you heavy attack with an Ice Staff, you do gain a damage shield, however it's based on your max health, but it will also make it so if you block, it costs magicka instead of stamina. That's up to you though. Penetrating Magic will ignore 3k of the enemy's spell resistances. Elemental Force will increase the chance of applying status effects by an additional 100%. Ancient Knowledge will make it so our Ice Staff reduces the cost of blocking and increase the damage you block by 20%. It's not super helpful for damage, but it is something. And Destruction Expert, if something does die by either your Destructive Reach or your Unstable Wall of Frost, you will gain 3600 extra magicka, and if you absorb damage while having your Frost Shield on, you restore an additional 1800 magicka every 10 seconds. Since we are using 5 pieces of light armor, Evocation is going to be massive, which will give us 20% more mag recovery and 10% reduced cost of magicka skills. Spell Warding gives us more spell resists. Prodigy will give us a lot more crit chance, and Concentration will give us a lot more penetration. Like I said, the medium helmet and shoulder is optional. We are way over cap on the crit damage, so you could wear light if you would like to gain more crit chance and penetration if you are solo, or to help clear out adds. But if you do stick with medium, you will want to get Dexterity. This will give you more crit damage. Windwalker will give you more stam recovery and reduce the cost of stam abilities, and then Agility increases your spell damage. In the Fighters Guild line, you will want to get Slayer. This will make it so you gain 3% more spell damage on your front bar, and then Banish the Wicked, which will give you 3 ultimate whenever you kill an enemy while you're on your front bar. In the Undaunted line, you will want to get to Undaunted Commands. This will make it so you restore more resources when you synergize, and Undaunted Metal, which will give you more max pools depending on how many types of armor you have equipped. Now, we are a Dark Elf. That is because we use a lot of mag and stam skills. This will give us 1900 mag and stam. It'll give us flame resist and extra spell damage. And then finally, in the alchemy line, you will want to get medicinal use. This will make it so when you use a potion, they last 30% longer, which means they have 100% uptime. For the rotation, this is a dynamic rotation, so that means we are just trying to keep up all of our DOTs The main thing you want to be looking out for is you want to make sure you hit your destructive reach once every 4 seconds, so that way we proc our front bar staff. And you will want to also make sure your subterranean assault falls off. If you proc this early, it'll cause the shulks to not resurface. You will have wasted all that time and resources, so make sure this falls off and then reproc it. Other than that, everything else, you just want to make sure the DOTs don't end. As far as entering in the fight, you want to make sure you have your bear summoned, and he will last forever as long as he doesn't get killed. And then for when you're entering the fight, currently we are using the more group-based setup, not the solo, so we are going to be using our weapon pots, and we have the orb and the elemental susceptibility. So when you're entering in here, pop your potion, you'll want to put down beast trap, shulks, and then by here, light attack, get your destructive reach, that way you get your 600 weapon and spell damage. And then after your destructive reach, you will want to go on your back bar and hit your wall of elements, so that way we can get our back bar enchant procced. By now, you may also want to get your flies, so that way you get the minor vulnerability put onto him. And then you will want elemental susceptibility, get those status effects on him. And then now it's just a matter of getting your orb and your ice spikes down. And then once you're on the front bar, you'll want to hit your destructive reach again. Make sure you keep that set procced. Throw out your flying buddy and then your winds. By now your shulks are also probably out, so you might want to hit your shulks. And then your beast trap will also be somewhat near there as well. And then if your bear is ready to go, you can just hit that, and bar swap is how I prefer to do it, is the quickest way. He does have quite a bit of an animation when I am trying to hit his ultimate. So I'll give you a faster little demonstration right here. I do seem to have problems with skills not firing off sometimes here. It may be because of the PTS or because of the game just having lag. I'm not sure though, but there was quite a few times where it does not fire off. Now, like I said, this is also the setup that is not using fighting finesse or backstabber, and we're still going to be at about 150 crit damage when the monster helm procs. So depending on your group, you might want to change that out if you're doing high-end trials or dungeons. But that's the thing. Not everyone runs high-end trials or dungeons. They might just be doing a pug, and you might not be getting good group members. So you may not be at the crit cap, and a lot of people don't even get close to the crit damage cap. So with this setup, you'll not only allow yourself to be at max crit damage almost all the time, but you're going to allow your other group members to do 30% more crit damage from the major and minor brittle. Now, if your monster helm is not procced, we're still going to be at about 116% crit damage if you use fighting finesse. If you also use backstabber, technically you could be at cap at all times, and your monster helm would push you over cap. Now, if you don't use both and you only use one, you're going to be, like I said, around 116, but your healer, when they use major force on the Warhorn that they should be using, you're going to be at cap again there. So you will be at crit damage cap most of the time. Now, as you can see, the stam is very slowly going down, just slightly. I'm barely able to keep up with it. If you want, you can swap out the Cliff Racer for a different mag DOT like Entropy or Scalding Rune, or you can throw in your Betty Netch on either the stam or magmorph just so you can gain more resources. Now, this is because I am using the spell pots. If you did the setup where you use the Betty Netch and Lotus Flower, which gives your sorcery and prophecy, you can use your heroism pots or your tri pots, which will let your stam gain back up as well, so then you'll be perfectly fine there. Okay, so there we hit almost 89k DPS. As you can see, minor vulnerability up 94% of the time, shield 99%, hemorrhaging 96%. For the major brittle, we had 46% uptime, which is crazy. As you can see, 150 on our max. And as you can see, this is without backstabber or fighting finesse. Now, as far as here, we did waste about 40 seconds, which is not my best run. So there was definitely better that we could do. Seems most of it was around my Guardian, Elemental Accessibility, and my Barbed Trap. Now our stam was having problems, so you could change out your jewelry enchants for the stam version, so you just get that extra 30 stam recovery in this setup. So this is the run that I did where I hit 94k. That is with the Whorl of the Depths, Frostbite, and the Nunatak. As you can see here, I definitely did better, so I did half the time on my best run here, and once again, without Fighting Finesse or Backstabber, and we are still up here on our crit damage. And as you can see, our Chilled is actually the highest DPS source that we have. It is constantly proccing at very high rates. Now this is the setup that hits for 105k. This is using the Reliquin and Perfected Nern. Like I said, this is the only time I had tried it, so I am sure you can get a lot higher and maybe change out the skills for a few other best in slot items. And once again, this is not with Backstabber or Fighting Finesse. We were still way over. I did not do the best on Reliquin. We only had 92% uptime. As you can see, we're basically about the same amount of spell damage. We do get about 4% extra crit chance, and we did a lessen on our crit damage that we'd be providing for the group. And as far as our resources with this setup, the stam was much better due to us wearing stam armor. However, the magicka, as you can see, was really suffering using this setup, and we only gained about 10k increased DPS. 95k, 94k DPS is plenty for almost all content in the game. Now during this fight here, once again, same setup as before. However, this is with the actual solo setup. So I'm using the Blue Betty and the Lotus Blossom in this. As you can see, we still hit by ourselves on the normal target, not the trial big boy. We still get about 6,100 spell damage and 47 crit chance and 116. Once again, just put on Fighting Finesse and you'll be good there. Now, as far as our magicka, this is what I want to pay attention at. You are just under on the regeneration versus draining. So if you had a healer just throwing out your orbs or the spears, then you should be able to maintain at all times. I was just very slowly going down while killing this guy, but even with that, near the end I was having a heavy attack a few times because, like I said, we were running out. But if I had that, I would have stayed even, and it could have been a lot higher DPS. Okay guys, so I don't want to draw on this video much longer. I just want to take a few looks at some of the combat footage. I went into Feign Lair and I went solo. As you can see, they hit really hard, but our burst heal is super strong. When that thing crits, it does about 20k healing, which is your entire health bar. So it is very, very powerful heal, and it's your giant AoE DOT that stuns things, so it's just a very good skill to utilize. Now this is using the solo setup, so we are using the Betty Netch and the Lotus Flower to also gain some healing when you light attack. And we are using the Heroism potions. As you can see, we just nuke down ads. I mean, our AoE is very powerful. Now, because we don't have a tank, you might actually, if you are going to use it for solo content, you might want to consider swapping your shulks to the magicka version, because that will provide you with major and minor breach. All these enemies don't have any source of breach, so we are having to fight with just the penetration that we provide for ourselves, which I believe was about 6 to 7k. So here we actually have a boss fight where we're fighting a boss.
Wow.
Where we can put on our DOTs and really focus them down, and we're getting hit constantly. And as you can see, even if we are roll dodging like crazy to avoid these giant AoEs, we are still mostly fine with our stam. It does get low right here, but once the potion is ready with this Heroism potion, since it does give the stam back, which is an expensive potion, but it does allow us to sustain onto both bars even with our roll dodging like crazy. Our bear does very powerful hits. I was looking in the combat metrics, and the bear was hit one time for 180,000 damage, which is a lot. And then finally here we got Colurian that we fight against. He's a stationary target, which makes it a lot easier, so you can get a little bit of a better sense for our DPS, once again without major breach. We do get minor breach occasionally from the status effects though. Now you do want to be careful with bosses like this. There's a few times where I throw out my ice spikes and I aim past him because it's where you aim. So if there's any type of hill like this that you're fighting against, do make sure to aim where the boss is at. But guys, I hope you enjoyed this video. Please like and subscribe if you guys want to see more of this content. This is a very powerful build. I did not expect it to turn out this well. If you guys have any other ideas for builds or sets that you have any interest in, please let me know down in the comments. I am very excited for Starfield. I'm going to be starting lore videos for Starfield here once it comes out. So I hope you guys enjoyed the video, and I will see you guys next time.